Today we will be reviewing the Best Practices in Early Childhood Education Kindergarten Guide. This will be webinar 1 of 2 specifically for kindergarten educators. This webinar will review specific content that will be available as web pages within our ECE division website. Here are the objectives for today's session. Understand the functionality and usability of the Best Practices in ECE Kindergarten Guide. Review connections between the TEKS and Best Practices in ECE Kindergarten Guide, research-based best practices, supporting emergent bilingual students and supporting special education students, exploring next steps for technical support of the best practices in ECE Kindergarten with upcoming webinars and office hours. We will review timelines, background information, the usability and functionality, the connections between the TEKS and the best practices in ECE Kindergarten, and next steps. First, we will review our current timelines for the kindergarten work and the best practices in early childhood education guide web pages. Currently, we have our TEKS, and in addition, we have our pre-K through second grade vertical alignment documents available within our TEA web pages. Our work in progress includes the best practices in early childhood education kindergarten and administrator guides, and this work includes updating the web pages to support instruction in early childhood programs. And you are viewing the first webinar in a two-part series for kindergarten educators. Webinars and office hours will continue to be held with these topics through the fall of 2023. Let's take a closer look at the training rollout. We will focus on the components that will apply only to kindergarten. Today you are attending phase 1 of our foundation webinars, which include developmentally appropriate practices, research-based best practices, supporting children with disabilities, and supporting emergent bilingual children. Our phase 2 webinars will focus on learning environments, and that includes classroom organization and routines, physical arrangement, activity and lesson planning, and curriculum implementation, daily schedules, and the phase 3 series will be held for all early childhood program administrators. I will provide more information at the end of this webinar with future webinar and office hours dates. Now let's review some background information. A while back, parts of the introduction section of the 2015 Texas Pre-Kindergarten Guidelines were taken out in order to provide a condensed format of the 2022 guidelines with a focus on skills and outcomes. The decision was made to compile that content as a separate resource, which turned out to be the Pre-K ECE Guidelines. And as we conducted pre-kindergarten guideline focus groups, we found that there was a need from the field to provide more support with best practices not only in pre-kindergarten but also in kindergarten, and guidance for early administrators who support early childhood educators. We began to review some of this content, and we realized that we needed a more thorough review of current research in the early childhood field, especially since that information was provided back in 2015. We also realized that we needed to have a condensed, user-friendly, and easily accessible format available for educators, which is where we came up with the idea of web pages, as well as realizing that we needed exemplars in the field to provide more practical application of these best practices. As we look at the Best Practices Kindergarten Guide, we see that our purpose is to support educators and to provide effective, high-quality instructional practices in early childhood classrooms. The audience for this kindergarten guide includes teachers, teacher assistants, district coaches, site coaches, and any instructional staff that support our kindergarten classroom. Let's transition to reviewing the kindergarten guides through the lens of usability and functionality. We want to share our shift from providing content in a physical guidebook to providing content through web pages. Our initial thought was to have the content in one comprehensive place. Shifting to web pages allows us to add or update content as needed, such as adding and linking to exemplars in the state, the ability to print specific pages as needed, and the ability to link this content into other sources such as our TEKS and vertical alignment pages. Here you see the landing page that provides the pre-kindergarten best practices guide, the kindergarten best practices guide, and the administrator support guide. As you click on one of the landing pages, it will take you to the specific guide. The example shows the kindergarten best practices guide, and below it you will see a resources tab where you will find all the individual subpages based on the content. As we develop content and think about supports for educators, our hope is to add resources as necessary, and the goal is to timestamp any updates on these pages as they occur. Now let's go over the connections to the kindergarten TEKS. Let's start off with some guiding questions for you to think about while we talk about these best practices. If you are a teacher, how are you going to utilize these guides in your instructional practices? As a coach or instructional staff member, how are you going to support your kindergarten teachers in providing best practices in their classroom? The purpose of these best practices guides is to create an environment that supports developmentally appropriate practices, supporting learning through research-based strategies, and providing support to all learners, including our emergent bilingual and special population children. Let's begin with developmentally appropriate practices. The concept of play-based learning capitalizes on child-led experiences that pique children's interests through hands-on, strengths-based learning. The use of a high-quality curriculum aligned to the TEKS that also aligns to best practices in content areas, supports all learners, includes progress monitoring, provides implementation supports, and provides lesson materials for teachers and students. The continuous use of progress monitoring that occurs through formative and summative means that develops learning and guides instruction, and the inclusion of partnerships with stakeholders that have an impact on our children's development, such as the family unit, staff members in and outside the classroom, and community members that collaborate with the kindergarten classroom community. What do developmentally appropriate practices look like in action? First, we want to use the kindergarten TEKS to determine play-based opportunities in the environment. This could look like using music and movement to learn phonological awareness concepts, developing number sense activities through free choice of manipulatives in a small group, or facilitating the environment for collaborative peer relationships while learning in centers, such as creating a diner store in the dramatic play area. This aligns directly with the use of high-quality kindergarten adopted instructional materials or curriculums that support these play-based experiences and provide teachers with opportunities to engage students in all areas through a variety of means. Think of using all the senses. Proper planning creates opportunities for culturally, linguistically, and ability-based experiences, such as building language and literacy through read-alouds, to engage students across all content areas, to address our emergent bilinguals as well as our special populations, and using a variety of tactile materials for artistic expression or for supporting opportunities through outdoor or nature-based learning. High-quality kindergarten classrooms continuously reference formative and summative assessments to adjust instructional practices that meet every child's ability-based needs. High-quality kindergarten classrooms in Texas utilize middle-of-the-year interim assessments, play-based observations, and/or adopted instructional material assessment tools to monitor the progress in the classroom as part of best practices. Building partnerships with key stakeholders to build a network of support for the high-quality kindergarten classroom. Kindergarten programs utilize research-based early childhood classroom assessment tools and provide coaching to all classroom staff. Utilize collaboration with families during the assessment process to determine developmental goals as aligned to the TEKS, and collaborate with the community to provide developmentally appropriate experiences like a walking field trip to the local farmers market. Research-based best practices in kindergarten include the power of play, ensuring that students are learning within their zone of proximal development, ensuring that all students receive differentiated instruction as needed, and ensuring that educators use the strategy of gradual release within the classroom to promote child-led experiences. Let's look at these areas a little further. What we have included in our research-based guide is not exhaustive of how children learn, but it sets a foundation for creating high-quality kindergarten classrooms. What the research tells us is that children learn best through consistent, strengths-based and play-based learning experiences that maintain the balance between teacher-led modeling and child-led learning that is engaging and developmentally appropriate. When we use the power of play with skills, we build content knowledge, language skills, and social awareness in our youngest learners. The power of play benefits the whole child through various means, such as make-believe, that bring joy and motivation to the child and is done through a freely chosen model. Using the power of play within the child's zone of proximal development allows the child to maximize independent development through play schemas such as a child using a block as a phone. This leads us to ensuring that children receive differentiated instruction. One aspect of that is scaffolding, where we can reduce the number of supports as a child becomes more independent. Finally, we address the model of gradual release of responsibility, which is another research-based practice. This includes modeling for children, working with children on a certain skill, and then allowing children to practice that skill independently. Think of how we model reading through a reading aloud, when we engage together in phonological awareness activities through that read aloud, rhyming games, alliteration chants, all to see children engaging in those pre-reading skills independently in the library center. Children identified as emergent bilingual students in a kindergarten classroom must have access to instruction with linguistic accommodations based on their English proficiency level. These accommodations occur in the way of providing constant oral language opportunities, enriching accommodations through their classroom environment, providing literacy-based activities to build phonological awareness across languages, and creating a foundation of consistent and supportive home-to-school connections to support emergent bilingual students in the kindergarten classroom. Let's take a look at each area as it connects to best practices in the learning environment. Differentiated instruction should be based on language, culture, and learning needs. Incidental learning should be natural, meaningful, motivating, interesting, and interactive. Social interaction and communication facilitates an environment that encourages communication and social interaction. Oral language in the supportive emergent bilingual classroom looks like providing multiple daily opportunities to expand and extend language input and output, using knowledge of the stages of language development in planning instruction with a focus on oral language and vocabulary development, modeling language rather than making corrections, intentionally planning learning experiences that include partner work to encourage children's efforts at communicating, and providing emphasis on specific language features. A supportive literacy-based emergent bilingual classroom looks like providing books and environmental print in the home language as well as English that are culturally and linguistically sustaining, providing instruction in an explicit manner with modeling of simple language and use of appropriate scaffolding during literacy-based activities. A supportive home-to-school connection in the emergent bilingual classroom looks like encouraging families to continue the development of the home language while acquiring English, and providing supports as necessary, such as bilingual books. Providing families without experience with U.S. schools with extra support, such as class newsletters in both languages, visual supports, and the like. Supporting our students in special education in kindergarten classroom requires an inclusive setting where children's needs are met through supportive learning environments that facilitate active participation and opportunities for communication and social interaction with all members of the classroom. In action, this looks like planning and engaging the whole child through accessibility and accommodations in the physical arrangement and organization of the classroom, including lessons and activities that are modified per student needs. This also looks like facilitating relationship building with peers through opportunities for communication and social interactions. For more information, please check out the Inclusion in Texas website. Let's review some next steps for this work. Our upcoming webinars include Best Practices in ECE Kindergarten Guide Learning Environments webinar 2 of 2, and that's going to be October 10th from 3 to 4 p.m. And then we have the Best Practices in ECE Administrator Guide webinar 1 of 1, and that's going to be October the 3rd from 3 to 4. Thank you.